Picture this. You drop $2,500 into an investment account today. 5% interest, compounded continuously. Because of exponential growth, we can easily calculate exactly how much money you'll have in 5, 10, or even 50 years, right? We just plug the time into our exponential equation and bam, we get the effect, a growing balance.
But wait, what if we need to work backward? What if you don't care about the final balance, but instead you desperately want to know the exact moment in time when you hit a specific financial goal? In other words, you know the effect, your dream bank balance, but you need to find the cause, the time it takes to actually get there.
So, exactly what year will your initial investment double to $5,000? Well, you can't solve this with standard exponential functions alone, because your unknown variable, it's stuck way up in the exponent. To pull it down, to solve for that input when we only know the output, we need the ultimate mathematical tool. Yep, logarithms.
By the end of this explainer, you're going to understand exactly how to handle these. We'll be covering why logs matter, finding the domain, parent functions and inverses, shifts and stretches, and reflecting the graph.
All right, part 1, why logs matter.
To really grasp how to graph a logarithm, we absolutely have to understand what it actually represents. As this quote brilliantly puts it, logarithms give the cause for an effect. Think about it. On an exponential graph, you input a cause, like time, and it outputs the effect, like a multiplied population or fatter bank account. But on a logarithmic graph, those axes are totally swapped. You input the effect, and the graph outputs the cause. It's like mathematical time travel.
Moving on to section 2, finding the domain.
Okay, let's dive into this. The domain is just the set of all valid input values for our function. Before we can even draw a graph, we need to know where it actually exists mathematically. But here's a question I get literally all the time. Wait, why can't the domain include negative numbers or even 0? Well, remember, a logarithm is just the inverse of an exponential function. And the base of an exponential function is always a positive number. No matter what power you raise a positive number to, the result is always going to be greater than 0. So, because the log function takes that positive output and uses it as its input, the argument of a logarithmic function has to be strictly positive, no exceptions.
So how do we actually find this domain mathematically? I'm going to give you 3 simple, actionable steps to follow every single time. Step 1. Take whatever is inside the parentheses of the logarithm, we call that the argument, and set it strictly greater than 0. Step 2. Use basic algebra to solve that inequality for x. And step 3, write your final answer in clear interval notation. It really is that straightforward. Let's see this in action.
Let's make this concrete with a quick example. Suppose our function is log base 4 of the quantity 2x minus 3. First, we take our argument, that 2x minus 3, and we set it greater than 0. Add 3 to both sides, so 2x is greater than 3. Then just divide by 2, and we get x is greater than 1.5. So, in interval notation, our domain is parenthesis 1.5 comma infinity. What does this mean visually? It means our graph completely ceases to exist anywhere to the left of 1.5 on the x-axis.
All right, section 3, parent functions and inverses. Now that we know where the graph lives, let's look at its foundational shape. And this brilliantly illustrates how perfectly inverse functions mirror each other. For an exponential function, the domain is all real numbers, and the range is strictly positive values. But for its logarithmic counterpart, the whole thing flips. The logarithm's domain is strictly positive values, and its range is all real numbers. The inputs and outputs literally trade places.
Let's look at the actual numbers to prove this. On the left, we have the exponential function 2 to the power of x. Check out the points. Input 0, output 1. Input 1, output 2. Now look at the log base 2 of x over on the right. The coordinates are entirely reversed. Input 1, output 0. Input 2, output 1. If you go ahead and graph these points, you'll see right away that the logarithmic curve is really just the exponential curve perfectly reflected across the diagonal line y equals x.
So here's the absolute crucial takeaway. Every basic parent logarithmic function, regardless of its positive base, shares 3 visual anchors you absolutely must memorize. First, you've got a vertical asymptote at x equals 0 because the graph hugs but never actually touches the y-axis. Second, an x-intercept that always sits at 1, 0. And third, a key reference point located at b, 1, where b is simply the base of your log. If you can confidently plot those 3 things, you can graph any basic logarithm.
Now that we understand the basic idea, let's move to Section 4, Shifts and Stretches.
Okay, here are your shift rules. And please listen closely, because I want to highlight a massive common mistake students make right here. When you add or subtract a number outside the logarithm's parentheses, it shifts the graph vertically, up or down. That does exactly what you'd intuitively expect. But when you add or subtract a number inside the parentheses, the horizontal shift, it moves in the complete opposite direction of the sign. Plus C actually shifts to the left. Minus C shifts to the right. Always remember, inside does the opposite. And hey, don't forget that shifting horizontally also shifts your vertical asymptote right along with it.
Now, what if we multiply the entire logarithm by a constant number a on the outside? Well, this stretches or squishes the graph vertically. If that number is greater than 1, say a 2 or 5, the curve stretches up a lot faster. If the number is a fraction between 0 and 1, like 1/2, the graph gets compressed, making it look much flatter. A really important note here, though. Vertical stretches do not move your x-intercept or your vertical asymptote. They just alter how steep the curve looks.
And finally, Section 5, Reflecting the Graph.
We've moved our graph left, right, up, and down. Now I have a quick visual test for you to keep things interesting. If multiplying by a number greater than 1 stretches the graph vertically, what happens if we multiply the entire function by exactly -1? Think about it for a second. How does that change those three visual anchors we plotted earlier? Well, multiplying by a negative creates a mirror image, a reflection. And there are two distinct rules depending on exactly where that negative sign lives. If the negative is slapped on the outside of the logarithm, it flips the entire graph upside down, reflecting it right over the x-axis. However, if the negative sign is tucked neatly inside the parentheses directly next to the x, the graph flips left to right, reflecting over the y-axis. And honestly, this second scenario is the only time your logarithmic domain will actually feature negative numbers.
Before we wrap this up, let's summarize the key points. This table right here is your ultimate cheat sheet for graphing any logarithmic transformations. Remember your order of operations. You want to handle horizontal shifts inside the parentheses first. Then apply any of your stretches or reflections. Finally, tackle those vertical shifts on the outside. Map your vertical asymptote, plot your shifted intercept, sketch your transformed reference point, and just draw a smooth curve connecting it all.
And there you have it. You now possess the exact blueprint to take any real-world effect and mathematically trace it all the way back to its precise cause. Logarithms, they really aren't just abstract curves on a whiteboard. They are literal keys to decoding timelines in finance, biology, and physics. So review your notes, practice sketching those parent functions, and I'll leave you with this final thought. What logarithmic cause and effect will you decode next? Keep practicing, and I'll see